The New York Jets have managed to play their way out of the first pick in the 2021 draft. So today on Sports Around the Bar, we are going to be going over exactly how their offseason should go for them to right the ship for 2021. My name is Jake, and I'm going to be doing each and every team this offseason. So if you're looking for a different team, or if you want to watch somebody else, there is always going to be a link in the description, and I'm going to throw a little... My name is Jake, and I'm going to be fixing each and every team this offseason, hopefully before free agency starts. So if you're looking for another team, there should be a little banner that comes up over here on this side, I think. Feel free to click on that if you want to move on to another team. If not, and you're here to talk about the Jets, today we're going to be talking about free agency. We're going to be talking about their roster, where everything stands. We're going to be talking about the draft. We're going to go over all of it. And I think the best place to always start is to take a quick look and understand what went wrong for the Jets in 2020 and see what we can improve on from there. So first things first, before we get started, remember things change quick this time of year, so if something doesn't look exactly right or if there's a signing that you don't see on here, just know I probably recorded this video before it happened. Let's talk about 2020 though. Let's talk about the Jets and their new $80 million cap figure now that they've cut Henry Anderson. They've made a little bit of space on their own and now have over $80 million to spend and can contend with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are only about $2 or $3 million ahead of them at this point. So we've got money to spend to fix this team, which is great considering some of the strengths that are actually already on this team. For the team that's finished second worst in the NFL, there is still some talent to be had here. It's not a total rebuild. We're not fixing every 22 positions out there. We should be able to make use of that $80 million and hopefully get this team back towards playoff contention, especially in a division that is probably more susceptible to allowing that now that you don't have the Patriots stepping on everybody's throat every year. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, you can see on the graph here, they finished last in the league in overall offense, 31st in the passing game, 23rd in the run. There's a lot of work to be done on this side of the ball, but when we switch over to defense, I know that 26 number looks a little scary, especially when you look at their pass defense being ranked 28th, but run defense-wise, they were ranked 12th, so we have some guys up front. We actually have some quality players, especially on the defensive line. We're going to be getting C.J. Mosley back, which is a massive... I can't understate how huge of a gain that is for them, getting C.J. Mosley, who skipped all of last year because of COVID. We have some weapons on this defense, so we're not entirely worried about exactly where that is. We're hopefully going to get a little bit better just by guys like Mosley coming back, but we are going to address that a little bit. So in that regard, when it comes to free agency, we're going to be focusing more on the offensive side of the ball, trying to get that unit back up off the ground, because I think that's been one of the Jets' shortcomings for the past few years, is they've not found a way to kind of support Sam Darnold. And I know they've made it pretty clear that Darnold's going to be moving on. They've now, I think their GM came out today and said that they were going to be taking offers for Sam Darnold. We pretty much know that the Darnold era is going to be over, whether they're able to move him or not. So when we're talking about free agency, keep in mind that we're going to be trying to focus on fixing this offense so we don't have a repeat performance out of whoever we get in the draft. Before we go and sign anybody else's free agents, let's talk about our free agents first. Obviously, you can see at the top of the list, the only offensive player who really made the key free agents in this group is Brashad Perriman. We're definitely okay to move on from Perriman. This signing kind of made me scratch my head a lot last year. I didn't really think it was that strong of a signing, and they gave him almost, I believe it was like $8 million at the time. They gave him way too much money for a really kind of iffy product that had one, just okay year in Tampa. Not really sure, didn't really like that signing to begin with. I think for that kind of money, they should have just kept Robbie Anderson, even though I said they needed to upgrade off of Robbie Anderson too at the time. They should have kept Robbie Anderson over signing Brashad Perriman. I think everybody's kind of seen that at this point. We're just going to let him walk. We're going to move on from him. It's time to really seriously upgrade this position so that our new quarterback that comes in is going to have the weapons that he can build with and develop with as he takes the next step forward in his career, which is that major leap forward into the NFL from college. After that, we have Brian Poole, one of the best slot corners in football. We are going to re-sign Brian Poole to a 3-year, $20 million contract that's worth $13 guaranteed. We have a lot of young corners. And when you have young corners that are still mostly unproven, I would say, it's important to have that veteran and that leader in the room. Brian Poole has been that guy for them. He's going to continue to be that guy for them as long as we can get this deal done. We can't overpay for him. He's not a guy that we can afford to pay, $8, $9, $10 million a year to. But if we can get him from somewhere around that 6.5 number that we have at this contract, that'd be perfect for keeping him around and keeping this this defense kind of from just being a totally new unit because we've had to make so many moves. I like the idea of keeping him around. Also, for the fact of some familiarity, while a lot of things are changing around him, it's good to have a couple guys that stick from an old organization to kind of ease the transition for all the other players, especially the young players that you've drafted, into the new regime. Next, let's talk about the two safeties we have coming off the board. Obviously, Bradley McDougald and Marcus May are not the same player. Marcus May is an elite potential safety that we are not going to let walk no matter what happens. So we're going to re-sign May for a 4-year, $60 million contract. That's $15 million a year, and we're going to guarantee 32 of it. So for the first couple of years, we're going to front load those guarantees, and we are going to use May as our kind of do-it-all safety. He's our replacement for Jamal Adams. McDougald, on the other hand, I don't think he's going to be as highly sought after in free agency. Not even close when you talk about Marcus May and what he's able to bring to the table. He just wasn't good for us last year. It's time that we move on. I don't think it's worth the capital to try to re-sign him, even though I don't think that number would be very high. Now that he's hit 30, the odds of him getting much better than what we've already seen probably aren't very high. It's time to just get younger at the position. That's why we're going to shift Ashton Davis in to a more permanent role as free safety, who we drafted last year. And we're going to let Bradley McDougald walk. Marcus May is going to play a little bit more of a free-range safety for us. I don't want to quite call him a strong safety, even though on the depth chart he'll be taking up that role. We're not just going to single-handedly use him in the box. We're going to use him in a bunch of different places because he's so talented. He will play some in the box. He will play over the top some. The key is we're going to have Marcus May pretty much do whatever we need him to do. Very, very similar to what we saw Jamal Adams do. I don't think he's quite Jamal Adams when it comes to his talent, but he's pretty close. I mean, he's fantastic safety in the league, one of the best we've seen out there. We are not letting Marcus May go. We're going to sign him to whatever contract it takes to keep him here in New York. Next, we're going to move forward and talk about the defensive end position, or the edge rusher in this situation, because technically we're at 34, outside linebacker. I know it's all terminology. But let's talk about our edge defenders. Jordan Jenkins and Terrell Basham, both up on contract. We're going to spring to keep both of these guys on shorter deals. I know there's probably some concern when it comes to their pass rushing ability. I see them both as average to maybe slightly below average with Jenkins of a pass rusher. But these two guys play in the running game is the reason that number, when it comes to the defense, was ranked 12th. Obviously, our defensive interior guys like Quinnen Williams and Fatu Kasi had played a huge role in the run defense as well, but having strong run-defending edge rushers can really help the defense out. We're going to spring to keep both of them on shorter-term deals. We're going to give Jordan Jenkins a 2-year, $6 million deal. We're going to guarantee the first year, a little bit into the second, but probably about $4 million in guarantees there. And for Terrell Basham, we're going to give him a 2-year, $10 million, with 7 of that being guaranteed to him. We're going to basically just try to keep these two position players and bring in a couple more guys to buff up that position. Right now, as it stands, we're not strong enough in the pass rushing department. It's why we struggled as much as we did in the pass defense, because we weren't able to get to the quarterback. We're going to try to bolster that by bringing in a high-dollar free agent that's going to be keyed into just playing those pass rushing downs, and then we're going to use these two in early downs like first down, second and short, that kind of thing, to limit the run game from other teams. So now that we've talked about our free agents, let's see exactly where we're at on offense. Obviously, you can see the roster here in front of me of starters. Rashad Perriman, let's start with receiver, is on his way out of the door. As far as the rest of the position group, we need more weapons. We cannot let our new quarterback, which we'll talk about here when it comes up to draft time. We're not going to be signing one. We're going to be drafting one with the second overall pick. With our new quarterback, they're going to need weapons and options and guys to go to. They're going to consistently get open. Rashad Perriman is not going to be one of those guys. We're going to let him walk out the door, and we're going to keep Jamison Crowder in the slot, who's been a pretty good slot receiver for us. Decently reliable. Obviously, Denzel Mims, you see I have the quality starter next to his name as well. Even though we haven't quite seen top-level production out of Mims, we're still excited to see where he's going to go from his rookie season and how he's going to develop, so we're comfortable with him staying on the roster. We are going to target a high-dollar wide receiver to take that spot from Perriman, and then we might even target a lower-round wide receiver to try to flesh out the rest of the roster. We still have a couple guys like Barrios on the roster, too. But the days of us not having weapons needs to come to an end. The days of us not having superior weapons needs to come to an end. That's going to start by signing a high-dollar free agent this offseason. We'll talk about that in just a second when we get to there. Next, let's move over to the offensive line. Let's talk about Mackay Bechten being our only elite prospect on that group. Now, you can kind of see by all the different colors of the rainbow I have up there, we're in very different positions with a lot of these different guys. But the one spot that we are 100% comfortable with, 100% sure about right now, is Mackay Bechten. He was a guy that when he came out in Louisville, I thought he'd struggle a lot more than he did, especially in his early years, because Louisville didn't run a really pro-style offense. But he has hit the ground running. He's been a great tackle, and we're excited to see if he can take that next couple steps forward and become one of the best tackles in football. Now, next to him, we have Alex Lewis, who, again, kind of a mixed bag. I have him here as average simply for the fact that he did show some improvement from 2019 to 2020. If he can take another modest step forward, we could be talking about him being a quality guard for us. But in a perfect scenario, we'd be replacing him at left guard as well, and we'd be bringing in a new offensive lineman to replace it. But we just don't have all of the picks and all of the money that it would take to replace everything on this roster in one swoop. So for now, Alex Lewis is going to survive as well. Conor Mcgovern at center. Again, not a great 2019. Not a great 2020. Great 2019. We're hoping we can get him back to that 2019 form when we signed him. So he's going to stick around. Not to mention, when you look at his contract, we are handcuffed to him. There's not much we're going to be able to do to get rid of him this year. Next year, that won't be the case. But this year, there's over $10 million worth of dead cap to get rid of him, and his salary is only around $9 million. So it would cost us money to kick Conor Mcgovern to the curb. He's going to stick around for another year. And again, with this new coaching staff, with this new regime coming in, hopefully we can get more of that top-level Conor Mcgovern play instead of what we got last year out of him. And then at right guard, we have Greg Van Roten playing. He's kind of been the definition of slightly below average. When I look at his play, it's one of those guys that he's just good enough that you can't replace. And I did look at replacing him. I looked at a lot of different options. Free agency isn't really one. Just for where we're spending the rest of our money, we're going to have other needs that need to take priority over a guard. It's going to be very difficult to land a free agent guard. And as far as the draft goes, we'll see. It might be a late-round pick that we bring in to compete with him. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of opportunity at the top of the draft to go after him and not go after some of these other positions. So Van Roten will likely survive as well in 2021, playing our right guard position. Again, we're hoping for a little bit more out of our interior group. We'll probably draft a guard at some point through the draft and let them come in and try to compete with them. But at the very least, I wouldn't expect them being a starter in 2021. Van Roten will most likely have that role until somebody can unless somebody comes from deep in the roster and can take it from him. Finally, right tackle. We're actually going to make a move here. We're going to cut George Fant. And the reason we're going to do that is because it'll save us over $7 million to do so. And that's going to free up some money for us to go after 3 very high-dollar free agents like we'll talk about here in just a second. We're going to replace that right tackle in free agency, and we'll talk about how in just a minute. But for now, we're cutting George Fant, and we're getting him off the roster. It just hasn't worked out. He has not really even had that great of a career to begin with. We picked him up from Seattle last year as well as kind of a roll of the dice. Hasn't really worked out for us. Tackle is just too important of a position for us to not address it at this point, especially with a young quarterback coming in. We're going to sign another tackle and try to use that to sort of bolster the offensive line and bolster the kid's confidence when it comes to what he's able to produce. He needs to be able to count on this offensive line getting the job done for him. That's not going to happen with George Fant, so we're going to move on in this position. Now, we could definitely use an upgrade at tight end with Chris Herndon there. A couple years ago, we had a pretty solid year. Up until that, pretty much since then, he hasn't really impressed. We do not have a high dollar or a marquee tight end right now, so we're going to look to address that in the draft. We don't have the money to go out and spend on one of these high-dollar tight ends. We're not really going to get much better with some of the low-round guys. So for now, we'll leave it up to the draft and go with Herndon for the moment. It's going to be one of our major targets, so we're going to keep our eyes open on that. And finally, just very simply, we need a running back. We do not have anyone at the position that I have a lot of confidence in. I know Perrine is listed now as the starter. We need a running back desperately. We're going to turn to the draft for that one as well. We might try to sign some low-dollar guys, maybe someone like a Chris Thompson out of Jacksonville that can come in and be a scat back for whoever we sign. But we need a bell cow, and we're probably not going to be able to sign that in free agency when it comes to the money they're going to get and the kind of way we've allocated our funds to other positions. So we're going to draft one. We're going to go and try to get our guy in the draft. Hopefully the second round will be good enough. We'll talk about that when we get to the draft portion as well. Finally, Sam Darnold. Again, when you have the second pick, it's going to be very, very difficult to not replace him. I know the GM has already come out and said that Sam Darnold is on the trade block, and we're already moving on from him. So as far as all intents and purposes go, I still think you could build around the kid. I still think he has a lot of talent. I just don't think they've done a good job here in New York of maximizing that talent and giving him weapons around and the protection he needs to make things happen. It's water under the bridge at this point. We're moving on from Sam Darnold, unfortunately. I don't really see a trade happening before at least day 2 of the draft. I don't see anyone really kind of springing out and saying, I want Sam Darnold to be my starter no matter what. It'll probably be a team that missed on the guy that they wanted in the draft that might make a move for us on day 2. So for now, it's probably just going to be a trade that happens afterward. We're going to look to trade him. I don't really see us landing one that's going to impact anything that will go into my mock draft at this point. So we'll leave Sam Darnold where he is right now, and we'll look to replace him when it comes to the draft. On the defensive side of the ball, things are going a lot more smoothly, as you can see. As long as we re-sign Marcus May, we are going to be moving on from McDougal, who struggled last year for us mightily. But with May coming back and Ashton Davis slotting into the free safety spot, we don't really need to upgrade too much. It might be a late-round pick again for depth. We might try to grab a guy later on, like 4th, 5th, 6th round, that can kind of be a swing safety and can come in and be a quality backup for us, maybe a special teamer as well. But there's not really a lot of need at that position as long as Ashton Davis kind of plays out to the potential we saw in him when we drafted him last year. I like bringing the kid in and giving him a shot at starting at safety. I think that's what we're going to do in this scenario. On to the rest of the secondary. Let's talk about the cornerback position because we have a lot of very interesting choices here. We have Bryce Hall, who's played his rookie year last year, didn't overly impress, but the pass rush kind of struggled as well. It's hard to grade your secondary when you don't have an elite pass rush. When you don't have guys that can go and put the opponent's quarterback under pressure, it's really, really difficult to gauge just how good or how bad your secondary is, and the Jets were kind of in that position a lot last year. So we're definitely not giving up on him or Blasson Austin on the other side as well, who's going to be going into his 3rd year here. But we definitely need to address the position as well. I think we need to go and draft another cornerback that's going to give a lot of competition to this, especially because even though we're re-signing Poole as well, he's getting older and longer in the tooth as well. He won't be around forever. It's time to continue taking corners and keep investing in the position until you start to get those hits. It's what Tampa Bay kind of did with their defense. We're going to kind of follow that model, and we're going to invest in that in the draft as well. We'll talk about that coming up here as well. For now, we have a couple guys that are somewhere in the middle, and that's why I kind of left them at average, because they could wind up developing and turning into very good corners. One of them could. Both of them could. Maybe neither of them do. That's why I kind of have them in that average category, because we're not exactly sure where we even stand at cornerback. The only guy we know we can count on, and I know he's not on this list because it shows the base formation, is Poole. That's why we were so interested in bringing him back. He'll be a good help, and again, hopefully a good mentor to help these guys develop. And if not them, then hopefully one of our draft picks that we'll talk about here coming up. Next, switching over to linebacker, let's start with the inside guys. We have Hewitt and we have Mosley. Obviously, Mosley, we paid him all that money because we believe in his elite potential coming over from the Ravens. We're hoping we're still getting the same guy. You never know when a guy's taking a full year off of football. It can always be tough. I still believe in C.J. Mosley. I love his game. I love the way he contributes in both the pass and the running game. Hopefully, having him come in as a leader of this defense will be the sort of catalyst we need to get up off the mat and get out of the 30s when it comes to our rankings. Or I'm sorry, I should say the low 20s when it comes to our rankings. As far as our second linebacker position goes, we have Hewitt there, and we also have guys like Cashman behind him that may be able to kind of work their way into the starting lineup or into the rotation more. I want to see how those guys develop when they have a leader like C.J. Mosley playing next to them. Sometimes that's all it takes at linebacker, and with him coming in, hopefully it's the impact we need to invest in that position too heavily here. At the very least, we'll give him another year. We'll see what happens with it, and we'll address that position more. Maybe it's another late-round pick we're talking about with inside linebacker. But it's not one of those positions that we're going to have to overtly spend to make much better right now with C.J. Mosley coming back and hopefully putting together a healthy 2021 campaign. For outside linebacker, we talked about already re-signing Jenkins and re-signing Basham. Both of those guys should contribute, but we do need to get stronger at the position. You can kind of see I left them between that quality starter and average group because in the running game, I see them as very, very quality players. I think I like having them on the field when it comes to stopping the run. When it comes to rushing the passer, though, we need more oomph and more speed. We're going to have to address that position in some way, but I don't want to... I just kind of got stuck in that sort of... They're not quite good enough to call them quality because they can't do it all themselves, and they're not quite average or replacement level because they're not bad players. Again, they're just role players, and when it comes to them playing their roles, they do it very, very well. But when it comes to them trying to pass rush, they aren't quite effective enough, and that's why we kind of suffered in the pass rushing, in the pass defense sort of game last year. We're going to address that position as well, but for now, we're still decently happy with what they give us on the defensive line. Finally, we have our interior defensive linemen. Again, you can see Fatukasi and Williams are also fantastic players. We love the development out of both of those guys. We have two of the three best interior defensive linemen, in my opinion, in the game of football. They may not be top tier. They may not be household names to a lot of people, but they are guys that win in the trenches and allow this defense to win in other ways because they're doing their job, and they're making sure they eat up those offensive linemen, stopping the run, and also rushing the passer, especially in the case of Williams. These guys are awesome. That's all I can say. They are awesome. Now, obviously, I'm sure if you're keeping up with the Jets at all, you saw Anderson was cut as well. That got us to that $80 million number. We are moving on from him. We are going to instead promote John Franklin Myers to a more permanent position, and we will try to buff that up in the late rounds of the NFL draft as well. But for now, we're pretty confident in Myers coming in, Franklin Myers, I should say, coming in and sort of sliding into that other defensive interior role, especially when he's playing next to two guys that are as strong as we have on the interior. We should be good at that position, and it should be considered one of our strengths going into 2021. Now it's time to spend some money. Let's talk about the guys we're going to go after in free agency. And as you can see at the top of the list, it starts at wide receiver. We're going to go with Kenny Golladay. Now, Chris Godwin is out there. I think his price tag is going to be significantly higher, and especially on first contact, I think it's going to be hard to kind of wrestle him away from a couple teams like the Jaguars. I think the probably better sort of course of action would be pay someone like Kenny Golladay or Allen Robinson if we don't quite land Godwin, or if Godwin goes for high tier dollars for a few $1 million less. And I think that's more than likely what's going to happen. There's going to be kind of a financial crush with the salary cap not really going up this year and actually kind of probably retreating. With that financial kind of squeezing on the market, there's going to be guys that take a little bit less money and don't always break the bank. I think if Godwin goes for that league record, you'll probably see both either Allen Robinson or Kenny Golladay. I think it's going to be both signed for less than that. That's why we're going to offer him a 4-year, $64 million contract with $38 million of that being guaranteed. It's still $16 million a year. That's still a ton of money for a wide receiver. Amari Cooper is at that $20 million range. I think 16 is probably likely where these guys are going to fall. But you never know. It might be a position that teams kind of prioritize and find a way to make the money for them no matter what. I think it's going to be a position that we're going to be able to sort of exploit a little bit, wait maybe a day or two past free agency before we work a deal, and then find one of those top-tier guys for cheaper than what somebody paid to get the first receiver off the board. After wide receiver, our next most important position we're also going to target is offensive tackle. Obviously, we talked about cutting George Fant, so replacing him is going to be pivotal. We're going to go after Taylor Moton from Carolina. This is a guy that may or may not be out there. If we do miss on him, or if he gets re-signed before free agency truly opens up, we can go after a couple other guys like Russell Okung or Villanueva from Pittsburgh. We have other options at the position, but the best right tackle we're going to find is Moton. In order to land him, we're going to have to offer a 5-year, $82.5 million contract, with 45 of that being guaranteed. It's still going to be a pay-to-play kind of contract. We're going to front-load a lot of those guarantees and probably have the last 2 years of that contract very escapable for the team. And I understand also there's a little bit of apprehension when we're talking about that much money. But the truth of the matter is he's been one of the most solid and consistent tackles, especially from the right side, in football for the past 3, 4, 5 years. He's been great, and we need that kind of consistency year to year with a young quarterback. We're going to sign him to a 5-year deal because he is only 26 years old as well. Again, that kind of consistency he can bring to the offensive line will be good at both tackle positions. The rest of it will just come down to fleshing out the interior of the line if the guys that we are keeping from last year don't quite live up to potential. But for now, fixing tackle needs to be a priority. For our last major signing, we're going to go after Yannick Ngakoue, who's kind of bounced around the NFL here these past couple of years. The reason we're going after Ngakoue is because his game is basically pure pass rush. He's one of the best pass rushers pound for pound of the past couple of years that we've seen in the NFL, but he's a liability in the running game, which is why it's so important that we re-sign the edge rushers that we already have for early first downs to kind of limit the run, as well as those short 2nd and 3 kind of situations. You don't want Ngakoue on the field for those. You want to put him out there when it's 2nd and 7, 2nd and 9, and you're pretty confident the other team's going to throw, or 3rd and 13. You want him out there to go after the pass rusher, and you want him off the field when the running attack comes. We are going to sign Yannick Ngakoue to a 4-year, $52 million contract that has $31 million worth of guarantees with it. Again, we're going to front load most of it, or as much of the guarantees as we can, so we have the option to get rid of him if his play starts to decline. But when it comes to Ngakoue coming in, this is the kind of rotational piece that should help us get those pass rushing numbers up and really help us put pressure on the quarterback. That should help our cornerbacks out. It should help the rest of the defense out. Hopefully, just signing him as a pass rusher is what's able to elevate this defense up out of the bottom end of the pass defense sort of statistics. Finally, let's talk about our draft, in which, again, the writing on the wall is already there for Sam Darnold. Our first pick at number 2 is going to be his replacement with Zach Wilson, a quarterback out of BYU. This kid's a bit of a one-hit wonder. It kind of scares me a little bit when we're talking about his production. We've seen the same kind of things out of guys like Joe Burrow before, and it's worked out. His last year was absolutely fantastic, and he did it without a ton of high-caliber NFL sort of targets. We're going to bring him in as our new quarterback of the future, and this time, instead of leaving him hanging out to dry like Sam Darnold with bad offensive line play and a lack of weapons, we're going to focus on fixing those two things, so hopefully we don't have a repeat performance. Now, he does scare me a little bit. Obviously, he is a little bit more of a one-hit wonder when it comes to his high level of production. The safer pick would be to go Justin Fields here, but you don't win Super Bowls by playing it safe. When we're talking about what we've seen out of this kid, his big arm, his ability to throw the ball down the field, his snap decision-making, and also his quick release as well, it's willing to take the risk on him being kind of a flash in the pan and missing here and drafting another quarterback if that doesn't work out than it is to take the safe road. But the high-end production is there. If this is the kind of guy we're getting and we're able to coach him up and we're able to fix the rest of the offense, this could be the guy who finally gets the Jets back to the promised land. We're going to take him at number 2. We're not even going to consider trading the pick. We're just going to take him and hope we have our quarterback of the future going forward. Now next, our second first-round pick. We're going to take J.C. Horn, cornerback out of South Carolina. This is a value pick more than anything. Again, we could go in another direction. All the people that want to talk about drafting for needs, we need something else. If a cornerback like J.C. Horn falls to a 23, you take the best player available and you add him to the roster. I know we have young corners with Austin and Bryce Hall as well. But when you have this kind of guy fall into your lap at 23, you just take the best available player and you let them compete. There's no such thing as too many cornerbacks. There's no such thing as too many guys that can stop receivers from catching the ball, especially in today's NFL that makes it all so much easier for the offense. I say take J.C. Horn here just because he happened to fall to them. At this point in my mock draft, he was one of those guys that didn't quite have a spot because other teams were taking other things. If J.C. Horn is available, the type of outside and inside presence he can kind of provide, we want to draft him for the simple fact of we're getting a great player that we know is going to fit in some spot in our defense, no matter what, at 23. After that, with our first second-round pick, we're going to take Najee Harris, running back out of Alabama. The reasoning should be pretty obvious. We desperately need a running back. We could go pay one in free agency. That is also an option. But with the high-dollar free agents we've signed in already and us needing a little bit more cap space to sign all these extra draft picks we have, I think the easier route is to draft one here. Why not go get a giant bell cow like Najee Harris, who's also an athletic freak as well? He kind of reminds me a little bit of Derrick Henry, where he's not quite, at least for his size, he's not a guy that's just going to go plow into guys. He's a little more evasive than that. But he is an elite prospect at running back that can give us the opportunity to bolster that position without having to spend a whole lot of money in the short term. We can spend that instead on other offensive linemen should that come up, or we can spend it on other positions as well. Drafting a running back this early in the draft, we should be able to get one of the first couple guys off the board as well. I think this is the optimal play for making the team the best that it can be for 2021. We'll draft Najee Harris here. For our first third-round pick, we're going to take Pat Freiermuth, tight end out of Penn State. Again, it's another position we need to upgrade. This is only the second tight end off the board in my mock draft. There's not a lot of great ones. Obviously, we missed out early on Kyle Pitts. It's a worthy risk. The only kind of worry with Freiermuth is that he doesn't have elite athleticism. He's not a guy that's going to run away from a lot of talented linebackers in the NFL. I don't really see him evolving into one of the elite tight ends right away. He's more of a guy that just finds a way to make space. He has good hands, and he can block as well. It's a quality tight end. It's hopefully an upgraded tight end, but it's one of those spots that, again, takes years usually for tight ends to come into their own in the NFL. I don't expect him being a day one starter, but it's still a position we need to upgrade and still a value pick here. I like bringing in Freiermuth here, even though there are other ways we could go. Getting the second tight end off the board in the third round is still a pretty solid investment when it comes to where all the rest of the positions are at and how many of them come off the board already. Finally, again, talking in the value sort of proposition, we have Cam Sample, edge rusher out of Tulane. This guy is a boom or bust kind of freak athlete that he may wind up never making an impact in the NFL. He may wind up being one of the best pass rushers in the game just because of his physical traits. He's still rough around the edges, but bringing in a guy that has that kind of physical ability, hopefully he can develop into another one of those pass rushers that can play with Ngakoue in those pass rushing downs. It's a worthy risk. When we're talking about third round and beyond, this is where you want to take those kind of gamble picks where maybe this guy turns into an elite player if everything turns out right. That's going to do it for the Jets. Hopefully upgrading the offense and then having a defensive mastermind like Robert Saleh coming in at head coach is enough to get this team up out of the basement and back competitive in the AFC East again. This is still a pretty good team, especially for what their record was last year. Hopefully with these new additions, they're able to bounce back in a quick way and really kind of gel with this new coaching philosophy that's going to be coming in. I like the Jets here. I think this is still a good team. And again, I was kind of surprised to see them as low as they were last year. I think they kind of underachieved in that sort of direction. Really, the key is going to be, can we get enough weapons to support this offense right now? I think the answer to that is still probably they need one more year. Even if they add Najee Harris, even if they add Kenny Golladay or a top-end wide receiver, even if they get better in the offensive line, I don't think this is a one-year fix, even in the NFL. I think this is probably going to be an offense that takes 2 or 3 years to really get back to where they can be an elite group. But at the very least, this is a big step in the right direction. I can see them getting closer to 7 or 8 wins, maybe being a fringe playoff team. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I can see them getting close and staying in the conversation towards week 15, 16, 17 of next season. Especially with there being 7 playoff spots now, I can see them being in the running if they make these kind of changes and health kind of sticks with them. Whew, that was a lot. Thanks for sticking with me through the entire video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think the Jaguars should do. What parts did I get right? What parts did I get wrong? Make sure you let me know because I love talking sports with you. I always try to respond to as many of the comments as I can. If you're new, consider subscribing because we're going to be covering each and every one of these teams in the NFL, hopefully before free agency starts, as well as everything in the world of sports we like talking about. So if you like to join the party, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you've been around for a while, it's good to talk to you again. I know it's been a little while. I'm going to hopefully post a little bit more consistently here. So for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jake. Hope to catch you guys in the next video. Thanks again so much for watching.